Dror, Benshetrit. Dror, Benshetrit. Yes, please come up. Born in Tel Aviv, studied design school in Eindhoven, just like me. Has an office now in New York. And if I'm right, he's successful. But we are all successful. Does architecture, although studied design, know that feeling. And is very interested in a structure of making things. Dror.
What a transition. Wow, I couldn't ask for any better presenter. I wanted to say speaker before me. Is there, maybe I can get a beer, actually? Yeah, I need to actually stand here next to my computer because I don't have that clicking option. I'm going to speak first about what is it that we do. My studio is based in New York, and we actually like to break the boundaries and actually mix product design, architecture, art direction, and things that comes in between. For me, it's also quite difficult to call myself a designer, inventor, artist. I can't call myself architect because I don't have a proper education in architecture, but I do practice quite a lot of architecture now. I'm going to start with a few projects and then a few kind of like early projects, a couple of things that were the beginning for architecture for me and the studio, and then end with actually a project that that is something that we've been working on for the past 4 years and just debuted 2.5 months ago in Cape Town, and I'll share with you a little bit about that. I'm going to actually, start with a project that is very similar to what Frank was showing actually at that time, not being aware. I think it's a bit wide, if we can actually switch to a shorter composition. Started with a similar thought as Frank showed earlier, and not actually being aware of his work at the time, reflecting on my time in New York. My very first year was quite challenging, and I felt this really like starting to get broken, starting to have those experiences that I was not really sure that are good for me. So taking an iconic form into the worst experience a vase can have, and reflecting actually the beauty of those experiences, then showing it to Rosenthal, and they thought it's quite exciting to show actually the beauty of those cracks within a manufacturing process. So each one of them was broken in a different way, and we decided to call it the Vase of Phases, which is part of the collection of Rosenthal. And the second project actually started with my graduation here in Eindhoven, and really plays with the idea of small space, a chair that we usually hide in a closet and are kind of not proud of, but we bring it out when we have more guests in our environment. And I wanted to play with that idea that, small space, why are we not proud of this chair that usually is practical but not beautiful, and actually hang it on the wall and show the beauty of an art piece and kind of break those boundaries between what is art, what is design, where functionality begin and when aesthetics. So once we realized that all we created is a canvas with hinges, that is actually could be an open canvas for different types of interpretation, we started doing different collaboration. The first one was for Mondadori, a printing house. The second one was Clear, actually, and we mounted on a terrace on a 70th floor overlooking downtown Manhattan, and actually commented on the view of downtown Manhattan with tracing it and adding a vision of building. This project, which actually I didn't start by speaking about, I'm always curious about transformation. Transformation and movement is pretty much evident in every project that I adapt, sometimes in a more metaphorical way and sometimes in a more physical way. So playing with double function, playing with things that transform in some project and playing with some project that shows it in the experience. This was really kind of like challenging the way that upholstery is being done and actually using nothing that is from the traditional upholstery technique. There's no weaving, there's no sewing, there's no glue, and it's actually 3 sheets of felt that are weaved on this metal frame, and actually by the use of the weave, they're creating enough strength to hold the person. My beginning into architecture kind of started a bit awkward in a way. I did not go to architectural school, although I had interest in architecture, and people always say, like, your work is very architectural, which I didn't know at first what it means. So I started thinking, let's take those thoughts of transformation into a larger scale. And I started basically just like every other little kid drawing an A-frame house on a piece of paper, and I kind of wonder, why does all the kids that I know draw an A-frame house? And then I went to some textbook and realized that there's a structural inherent for snow loads and kind of strong winter. And I realized that a lot of places have full 4 seasons, that you actually don't need this pitched roof during the winter. So I thought, what if you can possibly change this icon and put it on 2 hydraulic pistons, just like a garbage truck, and actually change it from an A-frame to a flat roof. And by doing that, not just changing the icon, but also changing the program of the house. Then we realized that there's a big difference between a summer sun and a winter sun. So realizing that I can actually use this movement to create a system that during the summer would actually shade the house, and during the winter the sun can penetrate in and warm the house. So it's also an ecological system. And that project really brought me to realize that I can take this transformation that I've been doing in different products and actually bring it to a larger scale. So we started building an architectural portfolio, and actually, in order to attract architectural projects and developers, one of the very few developers that actually came to the studio wanted to see what we're doing and challenge us to an interesting challenge that I never thought about before. They said, we have a small property in Abu Dhabi. It's 135,000 square meters of land. Come up with an idea. So I found myself pretty much with my very first international commission at that stage for just a conceptual study to really understand what is it that I can actually bring to a project like this. They gave us a very preliminary brief, positioning 30 villas on land, 30 villas on the water, and a hotel component, and all those amenities that would serve those residents. And I really did not really know where to begin. I started drawing arrows and kind of thinking, what is a master plan? Where do I really start? Very quickly, I realized that I need to first understand what does luxury mean in those type of contexts. And understanding that, I realized that I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see neighbors. Privacy for me, luxury for me in this context is actually privacy. It's not the fact that I see 14 neighbors from my left and 16 neighbors from the right, but actually, how can I camouflage all my neighbors and all those amenities? I start thinking about the Persian Gulf as a place where I know for carpet making, and actually realizing that I want to hide everything, like we always say, shove it underneath the carpet. So the program and all the neighbors, I proposed this architectural carpet that will hide all of the villas, all of the amenities, including the hotel, and would basically highlight the beauty of the horizon line and basically focus everything on the horizon line and the water all around us. So I started creating this presentation where we've done this to the hotel, and actually adjacent to the hotel, we played with this idea of kind kind of creating a center column that becomes a spiral staircase that actually have no additional columns. And then the villas on land are situated in such a way that each one of them have his own front. Oops, sorry. Each one of them have a unique roof structure, depend on where they are on the island, and having those kind of carpet moments where are cut and actually revealing more of the interior, and also playing with the traditional motifs of carpet making in the underside of this green vegetation. And the proposal for the land villas, thank you, were such that instead of actually holding the villas traditionally from underneath, we propose to actually hold them from the top, so they have no calm grid inside and actually have the same green carpet on top. I was really fascinated with this project at the time and really understanding what context we're working with, realizing that the climate is so hot in the summer, the water is not even pleasant to bathe in, so we proposed those kind of ice cube in the water that are chilled and more pleasant to bathe in. Then to an interesting challenge that I never thought about in context of design is high tide and low tide, and how can I address something like this in those type of contexts. I thought about a building that actually plays with the highest point of the tide and the lowest point, and actually have the wave change the amount of light that comes in. So actually when you get a massage inside, the building also gets a massage. The only building that I propose to actually put on top of this green vegetation is also a building that is completely hidden with water that are pumped from the ocean. So it's also camouflaged with the same surrounding. And actually, if you approach it with one of the four sides, there's a little hydraulic things that kind of pushes the water to the side and reveals the structure and let you enter. So we sent this presentation out. We got a phone call back a week later saying, the Crown Sheikh of Abu Dhabi saw your presentation and he wants to build it. At that point, actually, I had the same exact reaction. I just started laughing hysterically for about a minute. And I said, if you were Walt Disney, I would probably send you the same presentation. We have not showed it to any structural engineers. We really don't know if this can be built. This is just a vision. This is just a thought. And they, in fact, said the smartest thing I've heard from a client at that time. They said, we know. We've done our homework on the size of your team, and we understand that we need to pad you with the knowledge that you're lacking in order to make this vision come through. At this point, I always say we were quite lucky to realize that it's quite of a sustainable approach to do these green roofs and to reuse the gray waters of the villas in order to water the vegetation on top. But then we've been giving this crazy assignment to design all 65 residents. So what design can do? 6.5 months later, those renderings and creation that we've been working on together with all those consultants and architectural firms that helped us realize this, actually opened up a sales office. In 72 hours, actually, all those villas got sold out. So it was quite of a crazy project that I at first never thought will actually come to completion. Now it's under construction, and just to run through this quite quickly, but to just one of the things that was really interesting for me in this project is actually what an idea can do. This whole started as a very little thought of a carpet, and how can a carpet be something to hide things like kids are playing, and actually how this can become, a $1.2 billion construction budget project in the UAE has been to me still kind of something that is hard to believe can be a reality. But, it's very important to understand the power that we have and the power that ideas can generate, and the things that sometimes seems so far detached from reality can actually become reality quite quickly. So this is actually the first villa that was created on the island. You can kind of see by the crane on the side the scale of those houses. So how far an idea can go? I was working on a project 4 years ago, actually, for Swarovski, and we wanted to make this floor chandelier. And I was really interested in creating those two squares that are interlocking into one another without any kind of exterior square and an interior square. So something interesting happened where I realized that by connecting 4 identical pieces to one another, I can actually create something that have, today we realize, quite a lot of structural integrity. So I'm just going to show you how it all started in the workshop, pretty much by surprise, looking at shapes like this that are L-shaped pieces that are cut in a certain angle. And basically by putting 2 of them together and creating this form, placing 2 of them facing down, and 2 of them facing up. Pretty much by connecting one to the opposing one, this piece is actually connected to that, and this piece connected to that. I'll demonstrate it here. They're able to support one another and create this triangulation that I was quite fascinated about, and I was wondering what can we do with this? This seems to be something that could be interesting for all kinds of different projects. Later on, we invited engineers and realized that this form is quite strong. And the ability, because of those opposing triangles, to support quite heavy load was really interesting. And the simplicity of actually making those 4 identical pieces. So the first stage was really experimenting in the studio and building different things and kind of absorbing what happened when you connect them and support with them. So we now divided into 2 different categories. One which we're calling it a building block, basically panels like that. So this is the first kind of larger scale that we've done in the studio out of MDF, just to show how easy it is to construct a building from those forms. And not as quick, but almost. It really kind of started fascinating me, and at that time people said I was obsessed with this form. I really tried to understand what benefits does it have and what industry can actually use this, start asking some questions about the form. Is it beneficial acoustically, which we found out it is, and now actually working with an Italian company to create this highway barrier that is basically using these modules out of concrete. The first sample was this 1 meter by 1 meter of concrete, which you can understand that actually this piece can support 86 pieces of that size on top of it without collapsing. So it's really a tremendous capability in terms of load. So actually now they're making the next sample, which is a 2.5 meter by 2.5 meter, which will be 1 piece, which actually travel flat on a truck. And the reason for this dimension is that it's basically the width of the transportation truck. And the same company was helping us to realize this installation last month in Milan. The second part is a space truss, which is basically made in the same exact way. But the pieces are elongated, so they're creating this frame in between, but they're made the same way. They have this angle cut. So looking at different scale and realizing, can that be beneficial for what kind of projects? Again, the structural strength and the advantage of packing flat and the advantage of actually transporting it complete and actually just lifting it from horizontal to from horizontal to vertical, and it opens up by itself and actually present this space frame. We started working on all kinds of aggregated version of this geometry. At first, of course, in smaller scale because it's easier to make, and my background is in product. But then slowly. Thinking about it in a bigger and bigger scales, and looking at prefab homes and the ability to create homes that are actually transport flat and can arrive, which is something that actually started, of course, some years ago by many architects and designers in the beginning of the century. And unfortunately never picked in the same way. So in one way, we started looking at this kind of higher end modules, and at the same time realizing where is this coming from, where is this diagrid coming from. So just as a reference, of course, Norman Foster showed this in a building in New York that resulted in 30% less steel than a typical ground up, simply because of those triangulation. And of course, long ago, Leonardo da Vinci was actually playing with this geometry and proving the strength of this geometry. So actually taking this, bringing it back in a collapsible way that actually uses this, this type of geometry. We've been, of course, consulting with many engineering firms. Arup was one that actually helped us realize the importance and the significance of this capability. And this is kind of a pop-up pavilion that we're currently working on, and a proposal for actually a pop-up museum in South Africa. So it really all started with this corner geometry. So once we realized that this can be for all kinds of building type, and looking at this corner piece, we looked at, can we actually help with this geometry projects that are even more important, deployable projects for relief housing and improvement on structure for slums and favelas. Very quickly we realized that we actually don't want to design a low-income housing. We don't want to really have this approach of opposing our own design, but actually give a structure that can be used because it's simply stronger than a typical rectangular frame. So we created this kit of part, which actually I'll discuss in a second, but we started really absorbing this massive amount of people that living in slums and favelas, and really kind of trying to address just one problem, the fact that those homes are not structurally checked or engineers. They're very vulnerable to the forces of nature, and it's very easy within different nature disaster to collapse. So how can we just help that problem, just look at improvement on structure and actually let the people utilize that and actually use local material. We realized that in most disaster cases, there's actually a lot of raw material available to work with, so we actually don't need to deploy anything. What we can just deploy is those corner pieces. We call them the knuckles. And they're universal in such a way that they can plug into different members, from bamboo, which is available in a lot of different places, to beam and branches and other type of materials. So the kit is actually 4 corner pieces and 8 kind of static joints that makes this type of geometry. And then the houses can actually look according to whatever is available in the environment to clad it with. And just kind of as a reference for strength, the ability to utilize this geometry in comparison to a typical rectangular frame and a typical A-frame is a lot stronger. So yeah, and also the ability to ship. The fact that we can actually pack 1,750 of those kits in one container, you can just imagine how much we can help to a problem that is really in the billions of people. Yeah, so there's really infinite amount of possibilities, and our approach right now is pretty much opening this for collaboration and actually looking at different architects, engineers, and companies that actually can utilize this geometry and work with them to develop technologies that they can be used for anything that needs that kind of structure. Thank you.
He won't come up one step without his structural stuff. That's great. Can you put him down on the ground? See if you can stand on it both. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You want to stand on a few?
Is this? You must have studied Buckminster Fuller and all kind of other architects who worked a lot with structure.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, lately.
Yeah. And are there any references that you found interesting and used, or are there things like this in the past which?
You know, we're still searching. We got we actually first started with a patent research, and
Yeah, please go on. Wow.
all right.
Wow.
So yeah, no, we started with a typical patent search at first, and found that there was actually nothing. I mean, I'm sure going back, there's probably no evidence, but we still haven't found anything like this. We also actually have people now looking in kind of like a biology to see if this is something that maybe exists in nature in different way, but no, so far we haven't found.
I felt a huge difference between the start of your presentation and the end. And then Twitter reflected a little on it. He said, somebody said, first he makes triumph for the rich. That was the Abu Dhabi project with big villas, slightly unsustainable, or is that untrue?
Well, it's actually funny because I see it as a very much natural progression in my work. I actually like to show those two things side by side. I think that there are projects that you can only realize in certain setting, and project you must realize in other setting. For me, well-being is in fact the most important word to use in relationship to design. But a couple of years ago, I watched this film that is called The Corporation, and I went out of it thinking, I do not want to work with IBM, I do not want to work with those corporations. And then my approach completely shifted. I said, why not? Actually, why can I actually work with them and do better projects with them, because somebody else will do, worse projects. So I'm totally not opposed to work with luxury projects. The opposite, I think that project is an example for something that is going to happen and better realized in a better way.
I sometimes hear designers saying, I don't want to work for those kind of commissioners because they're often assholes. And I don't it's not nice to work with them. Is it true, and or is it not relevant?
Well,
because they're big project developers, we're talking billions here.
I mean, first of all, I feel like I shouldn't be generalizing, and maybe this
some assholes, some not.
Some are. Maybe conversation about this project should take place outside with some beer. Yeah, it's challenging. It's definitely challenging in a different way. You understand that they coming to you with a different aspiration that you have, and that it's, sometimes you need to be tougher to maintain your own integrity in order to, listen to what they want, but not necessarily deliver directly to the brief that they're asking to deliver, but actually, insert.
Yeah. And these both sides of your work come out of the same intention. Is it the same personal intention?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you describe that intention?
Yeah. I think at first, what I do is art for me, and then design, I use it more of a tool. I use it more of a way to actually kind of communicate ideas, communicate things that sometimes need to work or can be beneficial. And sometimes, they're inspiring because they are in many magazines and they can seed ideas to people. That question was before, like, is this something that needs to be in people's home or museums? I think that, in some contexts it needs to be in homes and it can actually help. And in some contexts it's actually better that it's in museums and actually be inspirational. So it really depends.
Mm-hmm. And would you advise an audience like this, or designers in general, to follow you and be pragmatic and give an answer to every question is asked and try to make the best out of it? Or would you say, no, I'm going through a development, because we've heard different stuff in the morning. We heard the India architect, I will say the name, I can't do it by head, excuse me, saying you have to really look what's going on in a community before you can design anything sensible. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that I can sum it with 4 words that I heard actually from an amazing lady speaking in the same conference in Cape Town. She's the one that started Riverkeeper Schools, and she summed her conversation with 4 words about education. She said, if you can first feel, and you're in touch with your feeling, and you absorb and see things, and then use that to imagine, and use that imagination to doing things, and translate that into action, and then translate the action into sharing, I think is what we need to do. We need to act upon what we feel is needed to act upon. And, yes, we can give projects out. We are giving actually a lot of projects out that we don't, believe in the ethics, we don't believe in the principles, but, I think that whether it's a luxury project that is going to happen and you can contribute to, or something that is more, mass production and help many people.
Thank you very much. The moment I got envious was that I felt the lust you had to design. And I see this lust in all these different skills you work in and all this different system. You really follow your lust to design. I appreciate it a lot. I envy you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.